Welcome back. Today we want to bring to you our third installment of our Interview Makeover series. And in these series, what we do is we introduce a strategy or technique that we teach and how to make yourself more memorable and more powerful in an interview. And then we role play it. So we'll do one example of an okay answer, and then another one where it's much better and where we're using that strategy or technique.
Yes.
So this one's called Elephant in the Room.
Yes. And we've already taught you acknowledge and pivot,
Right.
And show, don't tell.
Right.
So this is a fun one.
The idea here
Yeah.
is that if you've taken a career gap, a career break, and you're coming into the interview with, maybe a blank space or maybe a space that looks different than the other spaces. For example, you might have worked at IBM or Deloitte or General Motors or whatever, a big company, and had a big job for 10 years. And then these last 7 years, they look different because you're doing small business projects and, you're doing some leadership in your community. You don't want to wait for the entire interview to go by for them to ask you that question because you're afraid of that question, because that that's the one thing that could, for in most cases, make you less competitive, less desirable than the other candidates. So if you wait until midway or the end of the interview for them to ask you that question, you're always thinking about it, right? And how's your head?
Well, I think that's what I was going to say. So the energy that you're bringing to the interview is, oh God, please don't ask me that question. Don't give me that question. And so what happens when you use this elephant in the room technique, you are taking your power back in the interview. You're going to settle and you're going to feel more comfortable once you get that off of your plate. So,
and the other thing is that there's a chance that the interviewer won't ask you that, because very often the interviewer hasn't really looked at your resume yet. I mean, you have to be sensitive to that recruiter. They might have 15 interviews that day. They don't have time to do a deep dive, and they may not even remember if they looked at your resume, but that is something that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
So if they don't ask it and they go on their merry way, and then they're sitting in a meeting with the other team saying, well, what did she do why? I don't understand. Why did she leave Deloitte? Why is she doing this now? Now you've got an unanswered question, and there's a really good chance you won't be invited back.
Yeah. And one other thing, because we see this with our students all the time, your career break might not be for child rearing. It might not be for any kind of caregiving. It may be for your own mental health. It may be just because you were burnt out and you needed to step away from the workforce. So just understand and know that is not for you to explain on the interview. You don't have to explain that to anyone.
Right. We sometimes fall into the oversharing.
Yes, we want to overshare. Yeah. Instead, this is a great way to answer that question head on. And I want you to pay attention to, when we do the makeover piece, how Susan does that and touches on it, but doesn't really go deep into.
So do you want me to do an example like that, or childcare one?
No, it's up to you. What do you think?
Or family care? Maybe I'll do elder care.
Okay.
Or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. All right. So obviously this is totally organic, but I'm going to do the basic answer first. So Kelley's going to tee it up. You should expect at the beginning of any interview a question that's somehow framed so that you can tell a little bit about yourself. So if you're on a panel interview with multiple interviewers, they may ask you to come prepared with an introductory statement. But if you're in a regular interview, they're going to ask you a broad question, and often, sadly, it's because they really haven't had time to look at your resume. So they kind of want to know the general scope of who you are.
Right.
Okay.
So this could be sort of tell me about yourself, or it could be
what brought you here today.
So I'm going to go with, hi, Susan. Thank you so much for coming in today. We would love to hear a little bit about who you are.
Sure.
What brought you here?
Sure. So as you may have seen from my resume, I have a background in technical marketing. Started out in big tech, worked about 8 years there, had a really great career, loved it. I've been doing more like special projects now with some smaller companies, some nonprofits. And my real interest is in this particular position is to come in here and help you do a better job of promoting your really great products. I've done a deep dive on some of the things that you're doing. I think the campaigns are on the right track. But I think there's more you can do, because I think there are other applications for the product and other markets that haven't been explored yet. And I'm really excited to help bring those ideas and bring them to life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So you might have thought that was a really good one. I might have gone a little too far.
Yeah.
But because I did say, I did this work in tech, and then I did some small business clients, and now, but I didn't address it enough. Because, and I probably shouldn't have said as much as I did, because it was almost a decent answer, but I didn't address it enough, because there's a big difference between working at Google or wherever I was for 8 years and then working and doing marketing for the local Girl Scout troop. I mean, the scale is so different. The context is so different. So you're better served by giving it a little more oomph and explaining it. So I know, and there are no questions, because when you leave an interviewer with questions, it's easier for them to say, well, I don't really know about this person, so boom. Because one of the things I always say is that right now in the 21st century, an interviewer's goal is not to figure out who's the best candidate. Really, their first goal is how to push off and throw, dispose of as many candidates as possible so they can get a manageable list. So you don't want to leave them with questions. You don't want to leave open ends. You want to tie it all up, and you want to connect those dots. And I didn't connect the dots today in that answer.
Great. Okay. So let's do that. Let's connect the dots.
Okay.
So this is the makeover interview question response. Ready?
Okay.
All right. So hi, Susan. Thank you
Kelley.
so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
Just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, as you may have seen from my resume, I started out in big tech. I had a really great career at Google. I was there for 8 years. I moved up progressively through the organization, and my real superpower was marketing through storytelling, and really being able to connect with different audiences and not trying to put out like a stop me when you hear something you like campaign. I'm excited to do that here because I've seen your materials, and I think that there are ways that we can reach more people with a product that I think has a broader audience than maybe you're pursuing now. After 8 years at Google, I had a really tough decision to make. I had a child, and I know I said I was going to do elder care, but I'm a child. I had a child, and I was faced with kind of an all or nothing decision. Google's a great employer, but this was about 7 years ago. They didn't have as many flexible work options. Those became very available after COVID, but when I was looking for them, they weren't widely available. And I had to make a decision, and I decided to stay home with my child. And it was a tough decision. I loved my work. I was very fortunate that I'd been successful and I had enough money that I could quit a job. And I realized that that is quite a privilege. Not everybody can do that. But it was just as much a sacrifice because I was going places. I am very driven, I'm competitive, and I had to put all that kind of on the back burner. But knowing that I'm in a competitive industry, knowing that I had every intention of returning once my child was in school, I kept busy and I repurposed those skills. Now, of course, writing a marketing campaign for the local land trust and being on the board and doing some advising for a local nonprofit, it's not the same scale as Google, but it kept me current in my skills. Whereas when I left Google, we didn't have an e-newsletter. Now I know how to use MailChimp. I know how to use Constant Contact. Some of the AI influence tools were not available. I'm really good at those. Canva wasn't available, and I'm not a graphics person, so I've really learned those. So it kept my skills current. And sometimes when you're doing things in more of either a consultative or a nonprofit or unpaid or pro bono capacity, it's a lot harder because at Google, I had a whole team I could bounce ideas off. I had an assistant who could help me. So it gave me a broader perspective of what it's like to be kind of lower on the food chain and kind of, because I had to do a lot of the hands-on stuff. So I actually think that combination of experiences is going to make me better now as a manager. I think I have a deeper appreciation of what it's like to be doing the day-to-day work, the tactical work, even though this role is strategic and that's what I love to do. So I think it'll make me a better leader. And as I said at the beginning, I think there's more we can do here. And I just hope that you consider me for the role because I think I can help you do it.
Great. Okay. Time out.
All right, so you can see the difference.
You can absolutely see the difference. And I think the other thing that to just sort of put into your mind is that you're teaching people who you are. And your time away actually is an asset, and you made it into an asset in the way that you answered that, and taking your power back in the conversation and really empowering yourself to, prove, hey, wait a second here. Yes, I did do that Google work. And at the same time,
and a couple of things I want you to pick up on. I know you know them because I do them all the time, but one of them is that I talked about taking the break, but I think there's a perception out there. And honestly, before I had kids and I interviewed people like me, I had the same perception that when you're home on a career break, it's tennis, it's luncheons, it's, stacking books in the library. So making sure that she understood I was doing meaningful work. I was keeping up with trends. I was using some of the current digital tools. But the other piece of it that's very important is letting her know that it was a sacrifice for me to do that. I loved my work, number one. And number two, I was really good at it. So much so that I had enough money to not work for 6 years.
Right. Do you hear all those things that she said, even if you go back and rewatch this?
Yes.
Like, listen for those
really
pieces.
important. Every time you tell your story, you need to say those things, even if it's not necessarily true. Even if you really didn't have a lot of money, you couldn't afford it, but you always want, because your spouse made money, you always want to take credit for that success.
Yeah.
And then I kind of glossed over the rest. I had my child back in school, back at work. I didn't spend a lot of time talking about my child or my child care or whatever. They don't need to know that. That's only going to kind of divert the attention from what I want them paying attention to.
Yes. Okay. So there you have it. Our next installation of our series that we're doing. And if you liked what you heard today, you can hit that like button, hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have new content that comes out every Monday. And if you want to hear more about our offerings, you can visit us at www.preparetolaunchu.com.
And if you haven't already, we have a download available to you below this video. And it shows the 4 strategies that we're teaching, the 4 techniques that we're teaching. And this one is number 3. So go ahead and download it. If you've not watched the other 2 videos, go ahead and do that. And we'll be coming up shortly with the last installment in this series. Thanks.